Shalom from The More Jewish Jesus. I'm Stuart Darman. I'm the director of Interfaithfulness. And we believe that everything gets better when people get together around a more Jewish Jesus. And today I'd like to begin a series of book reviews for you. I do a lot of reading right now because I'm concerned about certain situations that I think you're concerned about too. Let's talk about the average church or Messianic synagogue. You go in there, and you see people praying very often. They have their eyes closed, their hands in the air, perhaps. It's not really a communal experience. It's what I call multi-individual experience. We've been very much affected by individualism. And so people are having their personal relationship with God, but they don't see that relationship as really implying any strong commitments or responsibilities or bonds with a larger community. And so people will, you know how it is, people will come to a congregation for a while, then if they get bored or, quote, it doesn't meet their needs, they're gone. There's no sense of commitment to each other, very little. And that's a problem. I read a book, and I want to tell you about this one today, and here it is. When the Church Was a Family, Recapturing Jesus' Vision for Authentic Christian Community. There it is again. When the Church Was a Family, Recapturing Jesus' Vision for Authentic Christian Community. Now, I don't agree with every single thing that is said in this book, but it is very interesting. And it shakes us up a little bit. It's written by a guy named Joseph H. Hellerman, who teaches at Talbot School of the Bible and Theology. And he holds that Yeshua, Jesus, and Paul followed, and the church until the 4th century continued a model of church socialization that mirrored assumptions of family life in the Mediterranean world. In other words, foundationally for Yeshua, for Paul, for Peter, for these people, these Jews, by the way, they saw the community of the people of God as essentially a family. In brief, this is what Hellerman says. Yeshua and his followers did not define loyalty to God solely in terms of a low group, individualistic, personal relationship with Jesus. For the early Christians, loyalty to God found its tangible expression in unswerving loyalty to God's group, the family of surrogate siblings who called God Father, end quote. So, it's not a personal relationship with God. You know, you can't become a child of God without becoming a brother and a sister to every other child of God. But people treat that like it's really not important. It's very important because how you treat your brothers and sisters is really the definition of how you're relating to God as your Father. Let's go on. Let me give you a little summary of Hellerman's book, and you can find it in more detail on my website, interfaithfulness.org, interfaithfulness.org. And this particular blog post was called We Are Family, but it ain't easy. And you can read a more detailed review of Hellerman's book, but let me give a little bit to you right now. And my goal is to help all of us to reconsider the way we form our religious communities and to realize that they can be much richer and much more beneficial if we make certain assumptions conscious and replace them with the kinds of assumptions that Hellerman highlights. So let me give you a little summary of his book. In chapter 1, he introduces the concept that when one became a disciple of anyone in the first century, it was assumed that you became a member of that teacher's group. That's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? You don't become individually a disciple. You become a disciple of a teacher, and you become a member of his group. In chapter 2, he explores family in the New Testament world, in which the strongest bond of all was the bond that you had with patrilineal, here's a fancy term, patrilineal consanguinal siblings. In other words, your strongest bond was with other people who were children of the same father. This bond and the expectations and responsibilities it entailed was stronger even than the relationship with the spouse. Now listen to that. If in the Mediterranean world the assumption was that your strongest bond is with siblings who are children of the same father, what implications does that have for how we form our congregations? Aren't we all children of the same father? Therefore, our bond with other children of the same father needs to be primary. Chapter 3, he talks about Yeshua's new group. He develops how the priorities and responsibilities of being part of Yeshua's group in Yeshua's teaching took precedence over other relationships. He said, whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. That's quite a statement. A man says to him, look, I'll follow you wherever you go, but let me go and first bury my father. And Yeshua says, well, you don't really understand the nature of the transaction. Now, it's not that Yeshua was hostile to people's family relationships. But when you make, when you make a relationship with God contingent upon other relationships, you're not getting with the program. And Hellerman points out 4 family values that Yeshua highlighted in his teaching. I found this rather interesting, and maybe you will too. First of all, what he calls affective solidarity, the emotional bond that existed between brothers and sisters. If you read Paul's letters, you see it's quite emotional. There was a real affect is a term used for how you look, but also how your emotional tone, a real affective bond. Secondly, family unity, the interpersonal harmony and absence of discord that Paul expected among members of the family. Not only do we have a strong bond that's quite emotional, but we're supposed to live together in peace. That's the assumption. Thirdly, material solidarity. When somebody is in financial difficulty, the others in the group treat it like it's their problem as well. You remember in the first century, we had all these believers in Jerusalem who had come to believe in Yeshua, and many of them didn't have any money because they'd come from other places in the Mediterranean world. They'd come to Jerusalem, the Holy Spirit fell, and they're all hanging out together. And then we read how some of the people sold their property so that the money could be used to take care of others in the group. Now, we might think that's kind of extreme, but for Yeshua and for his followers, that was the norm. That if you're my brother, if you're my sister, when you are in financial trouble, it's not only your problem, it's also my problem. And my job is to help you solve it. So, affective solidarity, that's emotional solidarity, family unity, material solidarity, and family loyalty. The undivided commitment to one's group was the mark of being brothers and sisters in God's family. In other words, nothing trumps my responsibility to my brothers and sisters in the faith. It's kind of strong, isn't it? I'm telling you, this is a strong book. I have some questions that I'll tell you about later on, but basically he's raising points that seem strange to us because it's not the way we do things, but it's clear in Scripture, and it needs to be read. Chapter 4 explores how this worked out in Paul's churches, while chapter 5 examines how it worked out in the world of Yeshua believers until the time of the Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. So this was not just a flash in the pan. For 300 years, it was the way things were conceived and the way things were done. For Yeshua, for Paul, for the early church leaders throughout the Roman Empire, the preeminent model that defined how believers related to each other was the Mediterranean family. Pardon me. God was the father of the community, and believers were brothers and sisters. The group came first. Family values, for everything from emotional attachment to sharing in material goods to uncompromising family loyalty, determined the relational ethos of believers' behavior. This is the way they hung out. And when people looked at the group, they would say, look how these people love each other. Look how they take care of each other. This was not unusual. They were brothers and sisters. They were children of the same father. It's modeled after the Mediterranean family, and they lived it out. Chapter 7 talks about life together in the family of God. Chapter 8 talks about decision-making in the family of God. That even your decisions were not just your private decisions. I was part of a house group in New York City when I moved to California. And I just decided I was going to leave and go to California, which I did. But one of the leaders of the house group, I remember, he called me aside. He says, what is this? You just decide you're going to go and you go. No processing it with the group. I had no sense that this was family that I should process it with. And that may sound strange to us, but it's not strange to the Bible, so it's kind of fascinating. And it would change the way people perceive us if they saw these kinds of loyal, committed relationships among us, rather than people just thinking about my personal relationship with God, and if I don't like it here, I'll go somewhere else, kind of a shopping mentality. Doesn't work. In chapter 8, we read about how within this model, major life decisions were made with the group. Chapter 9, he wisely examines how to avoid abuses, because this can be very controlling. And it can be even cultic if you're not careful, where everybody's making your decisions for your life but you. That you got to watch out for. So, let me talk to you about some issues and questions I had about the book. And you can read more of my review on the website, interfaithfulness.org, looking for the blog called We Are Family, but it ain't easy. But let me give you some of my reservations. I found his thesis and exhortation to be unduly optimistic. You can't argue against the advisability of a group of Yeshua believers being a family, and with the members treating each other like honored siblings and deferring to the group in areas we have been taught to be solely in the private domain. You can't argue with his thesis. But you he presents this family model as though it's going to solve all problems. And it's not going to solve all problems. Why? Because most families are dysfunctional. Most spiritual families are dysfunctional. And to imagine that the community of believers, which is a surrogate family, is not going to be dysfunctional is really, I don't think it's reasonable. He also fails to note how the strident comments in the Gospels about whoever honors father and mother more than me is not worthy of me and other things like this, these are statements that are made to a community in crisis. And he's saying, push is coming to shove. You're going to be pressured to bail out on your commitments to other believers. Well, don't do it. So we need to realize that these hard line statements were made in an atmosphere of crisis and need to be interpreted that way. Finally, Hellemann's model doesn't map cleanly on the Jewish context, because he totally fails to notice that as Yeshua believers who are Jews, we have an enduring, continuing, holy, covenantal responsibility to the rest of the Jewish community. We can't just tell the Jewish community, hey, I got a new community now of Yeshua believers. It was nice being with you, but see you later, alligator. You can't do that, because we have a holy, covenantal relationship with other Jews. So we're not just obliged to take care of other Yeshua believers. We're not just obliged to have affective solidarity with them, material solidarity with them, relational solidarity with them. Our bond with the Jewish world, and that includes our family, continues, not just because we want it to, but because it's a biblical mandate. Still, I find Hellemann's book useful because of the wealth of information he brings. And I would suggest you read it, because I was just talking to a friend of mine today. Los Angeles, which is where this is coming from, the greater Los Angeles community is the third largest collection of Jews in the world. First is Israel. Second is the United States in general. Within the United States, of course, then you'd say New York. Let's make that within the United States. New York is number 3. But then Los Angeles would be number 4. There are more Jews in Los Angeles, greater Los Angeles, than in all of France, which nationally is the third largest concentration of Jews in the world. Israel, United States, France. But there are more Jews in Los Angeles than there are in France. So my point is, we're not doing a very good job of wooing, enfolding Jewish people into Yeshua faith. You go to the average Messianic congregation, and some places you got to look real hard to find the Jews. Something is wrong. One of the things that is wrong is that our spirituality doesn't have this kind of relational bond. It doesn't have this strong family feeling. It's not magnetic. People don't have occasion to say, look how they love one another. Look how they take care of each other. This is really something. That's what they said in the 1st century. That's what they said in the 2nd century. That's what they said in the 3rd century. But that's not what they say about us. I think it's because we've been engulfed with rampant individualism. But Hellerman will help us. So if you found this interesting and you want to beef it up, I give you 2 ideas. Number 1, visit my blog at interfaithfulness.org and look for the blog that's called We Are Family, but it ain't easy. And for those of you who are really ambitious, get the book, When the Church Was a Family, recapturing Jesus' vision for authentic Christian, or in our case, Messianic community. Thank you very much. It's been great being with you today. Next time I've got another book review for you. I'm reading some stuff that's really important for revolutionizing the way we do things and bringing us out of ineffectiveness to effectiveness. If you find that interesting, I'll see you then. And remember, everything gets better when people get together around a more Jewish Jesus. Shalom.
You may support our work at Toward a More Jewish Jesus by sending your tax-deductible contributions to Interfaithfulness, P.O. Box 6137, Altadena, California 91003, 6137. That's Interfaithfulness, P.O. Box 6137, Altadena, California 91003-6137. Please make out your checks to Interfaithfulness. If you prefer donating on the web, please visit us at www.interfaithfulness.org and look for the donate button in the lower right corner of the page. We invite you to follow us too at our Interfaithfulness Facebook page. Thanks for joining us today at Interfaithfulness, where everything changes for the better when we move toward a more Jewish Jesus.